You have felt it, haven't you? That invisible weight that settles upon your shoulders, like morning mist that refuses to lift, like stones gathering in your chest while you sleep, like the gravity of unspoken sorrows pulling your spirit toward depths you never knew existed within you. The days when your soul carries more than your body ever could, and yet the world asks you to smile, to move forward, to pretend that this heaviness is merely fatigue or temporary melancholy. But let me tell you something your spirit already knows, something that has been whispered through the corridors of your heart when the noise of the world grows too loud to bear. This weight you carry is not your burden, it is your cocoon. This heaviness that feels like drowning is actually the sacred process of your soul learning to breathe underwater, preparing for a transformation so profound that your current self cannot yet imagine its magnitude. There is a secret that moves through the hearts of those who feel too much in a world that feels too little, a whisper that travels from soul to soul, carried on the wind of ancient wisdom that predates every philosophy and outlasts every empire. Your heaviness is not the end of your story. It is the soil from which your new life is preparing to grow, the fertile darkness where seeds of possibility have been planted by hands more loving and more knowing than your conscious mind can comprehend. The great mystic knew this truth, understood it with the bone-deep certainty that comes only from walking through his own valleys of shadow and emerging with light in his hands. And tonight, as we sit together in this moment of understanding, I will share with you what he discovered about the sacred weight that transforms us, about the holy gravity that pulls us down only to teach us how to rise with wings we never knew we possessed. The world has taught you to fear this feeling, to medicate it away with the thousand small distractions it offers like breadcrumbs to lost children, to run from it as if it were a shadow chasing you through endless corridors of obligation and expectation, through the maze of other people's definitions of who you should be and how you should feel and what you should want from this brief and precious life. But shadows, dear soul, only exist where light is present. Your heaviness is proof that somewhere within you a light burns so brightly that it creates this darkness you mistake for defeat. This contrast you interpret as failure. You are not falling apart. You are falling together the way autumn leaves fall toward the earth, not in desperation but in fulfillment of their deepest purpose, returning to the source that gave them life so they can nurture the growth that is to come. Listen closely to what your weary heart has been trying to tell you past the noise of well-meaning advice and societal expectations, past the voice that tells you to be grateful for what you have and stop feeling so much about
everything. There is a language that exhaustion speaks, a wisdom that lives in the spaces between your sighs, in the pause before you answer when someone asks how you are doing. When everything feels heavy, it is because you are carrying things that were never yours to carry in the first place. The expectations of others, the dreams that belong to different seasons of your life, the weight of trying to be everything to everyone while forgetting to be anything to yourself, the burden of believing that your worth is measured by how much you can endure rather than how authentically you can exist. Your soul is not weak, your soul is wise. It knows when to say enough, when to set down what does not belong to you, when to honor the sacred boundary between helping others and losing yourself in the process. There is a sacred rebellion that begins in moments like this, not the rebellion of anger or destruction that the world fears and tries to silence, but the quiet uprising of a spirit that remembers its true nature, that recalls the song it came here to sing before the world told it to whisper, before life taught it to apologize for taking up space. You see, heaviness comes when we resist the current of our own becoming, like a river that tries to flow uphill, like a bird that attempts to swim instead of fly. We exhaust ourselves fighting the very direction our spirit longs to travel, swimming against the tide of our own evolution, mistaking the call of our deepest self for the voice of weakness or self-indulgence. But what if the weight you feel is simply your soul's way of saying, stop running from who you are becoming. Stop apologizing for the magnificent creature you are in the process of becoming. Stop trying to fit into spaces that were designed for a smaller version of yourself. Your soul grows where the world believes you are breaking. There is a strength that can only be forged in the fires of feeling too much, caring too deeply, loving too completely in a world that has forgotten how to receive such gifts, that has taught its children to armor their hearts and ration their compassion as if love were a finite resource that might run out if shared too freely. Your sensitivity is not your weakness. It is your spiritual technology, your way of receiving the signals that others cannot hear, the messages that only hearts like yours can decode, the frequencies of truth that broadcast on wavelengths accessible only to those who have learned to tune their souls to the deeper rhythms of existence. You are not broken because you feel everything. You are awakened because you feel everything. In the desert of his exile, the prophet learned that the sand which seemed to bury him was actually polishing him, wearing away everything false until only the essential remained, until only truth could survive the constant erosion of pretense and performance. Each grain of difficulty, each moment of overwhelming fatigue was slowly wearing away everything that was
not essential, everything that was not truly him, everything he had accumulated in his attempts to please a world that could never be satisfied with anything less than his authentic self. Your heaviness is performing the same sacred work. It is burning away the false selves you have carried, the masks you have worn to gain acceptance, the versions of yourself that were created to please a world that never truly saw you anyway, that was always looking for someone else wearing your face. The butterfly does not emerge from the chrysalis feeling light and free immediately, does not skip gracefully into flight the moment it breaks free from the confines that have been both its protection and its prison. There is a moment just before the wings unfold when everything feels impossibly heavy, when the old form is dying but the new one has not yet learned its own power, has not yet discovered what it is capable of becoming. This is where you are now, beloved soul, not at the end but at the threshold, not failing but transforming, not dying but being reborn into a version of yourself that the caterpillar could never have imagined. The weight you feel is not your destruction. It is your metamorphosis, the labor pains of a new self coming into being. Think of the great trees that have weathered countless storms, that stand as monuments to endurance, not because they avoided the wind, but because they learned how to dance with it, how to bend without breaking, how to let the storm pass through them, rather than standing rigid against it like soldiers fighting an enemy that cannot be defeated through force. Their strength does not come from their ability to remain unchanged, but from their willingness to sway, to lose some leaves, to grow deeper roots in response to each challenge, to become more themselves rather than less. Your heaviness is the storm, and you are learning to be the tree. Each moment you do not break, you are developing roots that go deeper than you ever imagined possible, drawing nourishment from sources you never knew existed. There is a frequency that pain broadcasts, a signal that calls to other souls who have walked this path of sacred weariness, who have felt the weight of the world settling into their bones like ancient memory, like recognition of a burden they were born to carry, not as punishment, but as privilege. You are not alone in your heaviness, dear one, though the weight you carry may feel so personal, so specific to your own story that you cannot imagine others truly understanding the particular flavor of your struggle, the precise texture of your weariness, the exact shape of the hole that has opened up inside you where lightness used to live. But across the world, in quiet moments like this one, in bedrooms where sleep refuses to come, in coffee shops where people stare out windows with distant eyes, in walking paths where footsteps slow and shoulders droop with invisible burdens, others are feeling what you feel, carrying
what you carry, learning what you are learning about the mysterious alchemy that transforms lead into gold, suffering into wisdom, isolation into compassion, despair into the deepest form of hope imaginable. You are part of an invisible congregation of souls, a wordless fellowship of the walking wounded who have been called to feel deeply in order to heal completely, to break open in order to let the light in, to descend into the underworld of their own psyche in order to discover the stars that shine only in the depths of night, the treasures that can only be found by those willing to dig in the darkness. This congregation has no churches, no official membership, no doctrine except the shared understanding that some journeys can only be made alone, and yet somehow, mysteriously, we make them together, connected by threads of empathy that span oceans and decades and cultural differences. There are others right now in this very moment who are learning to breathe underwater as you are learning to breathe underwater, who are discovering that they are stronger than they thought as you are discovering that you are stronger than you thought, who are finding light in places they never expected to find light. As you are finding light in places you never expected to find light, there are mothers holding babies at 3 a.m, feeling the weight of unconditional love and unconditional responsibility settling into their bones, like gravity itself. There are teenagers lying awake in beds, feeling too much and understanding too little, sensing that the world they are inheriting is broken in ways that require new kinds of healing. There are artists staring at blank canvases, feeling the pressure of beauty that wants to be born, but doesn't yet know its own form, carrying the weight of visions that have no words, of songs that have no melody yet, of stories that are still gathering courage to tell themselves. There are healers and teachers and gardeners and cooks and mechanics and accountants who have all learned that sensitivity is not weakness, but a form of spiritual technology. That feeling, everything is not a burden, but a gift. That the ability to sense what others cannot sense is a form of service to the collective healing of our species. Some of them are your age, some older, some younger, all of them united by this strange capacity to feel the world's pain as if it were their own, to sense the collective grief that moves like underground rivers beneath the surface of normal conversation, to pick up frequencies of suffering that broadcast on wavelengths that only certain kinds of souls can receive. You know these people when you meet them, even if you never speak of this shared sensitivity directly. There is something in their eyes, something in the quality of their attention, something in the way they listen that tells you they have been where you have been, that they understand the territory you are navigating without needing maps or
explanations. The ancient wisdom speaks of a time when the sensitive ones would feel the weight of the world's transformation before others even noticed the change beginning, would serve as the early warning system for a species learning to evolve beyond the patterns that no longer serve its highest good, beyond the systems that prioritize production over presence, achievement over authenticity, having over being. You are among these souls, dear one, these canaries in the coal mine of collective consciousness, these early responders to the spiritual emergency that has been building for generations. Your heaviness is not personal pathology. It is spiritual sensitivity, the capacity to sense the labor pains of a world being reborn, to feel the growing edges of humanity's next evolution, to register the frequencies of change before they become visible to those who navigate life primarily through their minds rather than their hearts. What you call depression may be the earth itself, breathing through you, grieving through you, healing through you, using your nervous system to process the collective trauma that must be acknowledged before it can be released, the ancestral wounds that must be felt before they can be transformed, the species-wide patterns of disconnection and domination that must be witnessed before new patterns of connection and collaboration can emerge. You are not suffering from a personal defect. You are participating in a planetary healing that requires some souls to feel more deeply, to carry more consciously, to process more completely the pain that has been accumulating in the collective unconscious for centuries. But here, in this moment of recognition, something begins to shift, like tectonic plates rearranging themselves deep beneath the surface of consciousness, like ice breaking up after a long winter, like seeds that have waited in darkness finally feeling the first warm touch of spring rain. Do you feel it? The weight is still there, but it is changing quality, changing meaning, changing from burden to gift, from curse to blessing, from ending to beginning, like water that has been holding its breath suddenly remembering how to flow, like a song that has been waiting for the right moment to be sung, like a truth that has been hiding behind fear suddenly finding the courage to show its face. This is the moment the mystic wrote about. When suffering becomes conscious, it transforms into wisdom. When pain becomes witnessed, it transforms into compassion. When heaviness becomes understood, it transforms into depth. You do not need to carry this weight forever, beloved. You only needed to carry it until you understood its message, until you learned what it came to teach you about your own capacity, your own strength, your own readiness for the next phase of your becoming. And the message is this: you are too vast for the small life you have been trying to live, too expansive for the narrow definitions others have placed upon you, too deep for the shallow waters where others are content to play. Your soul is too magnificent to be contained by the boxes the world has constructed for you, too wild to be domesticated by expectations that were designed for someone else entirely. The heaviness comes because your spirit is pregnant with a larger version of yourself, and like all births, there is a time of labor before the new life emerges, a period of contraction before the expansion, a season of darkness before the dawn. And then you understand that what you feared was never your enemy, but the doorway asking to be opened, the invitation asking to be accepted, the call asking to be answered. The wait was not punishment, but preparation, not evidence of your unworthiness, but proof of your readiness to carry something magnificent. The heaviness was not a sign of your failure, but evidence of your capacity to hold the light that is about to burst forth from you like dawn breaking over mountains that have stood in darkness for too long, like flowers blooming after a winter so harsh it seemed nothing would ever grow again. You have been in training, dear one, training to hold the frequency of love in a world that has forgotten its own heart, training to carry hope for those who have lost their way, training to be the lighthouse that guides others home to themselves when they have wandered too long in territories that do not recognize their true name. The weight you have carried was your spiritual gymnasium, strengthening muscles you didn't know you had, preparing you for work you didn't know you were called to do, readying you for a purpose that is about to reveal itself like sunrise after the longest night of the soul. Now, as you feel this truth settling into your bones, like medicine finding its way to exactly where healing is needed, you begin to recognize the signs of your own resurrection, not as dramatic transformation, but as quiet return to who you have always been beneath the layers of conditioning and compromise. The heaviness is not lifting all at once, but it is changing texture, changing from the weight of burden to the weight of wisdom, from the gravity of despair to the groundedness of understanding. Like clay in the hands of a master potter, your soul is being shaped into something beautiful, something necessary, something the world has been waiting for without knowing it was waiting. There is a quality of attention that your suffering has taught you, a way of seeing that only those who have walked through the valley of heaviness can possess, a depth of perception that comes only to those who have learned to find light in the deepest darkness. You will use this vision to see others who are walking where you have walked, to recognize the signs of sacred struggle in faces that try to hide their pain, to offer the kind of understanding that can only come from someone who has been there and returned with medicine. Your depth will call to their depth. Your healing
will become their hope. The weight that nearly broke you will become the strength that lifts others. The very thing that brought you to your knees will become the foundation upon which you help others stand. This is how the universe transforms pain into purpose, wounds into wisdom, heaviness into holiness, how the very experiences that seem designed to destroy us become the source of our greatest power, our deepest compassion, our most authentic service. Listen now to the sound of your own breathing, in and out, carrying you through this moment, just as it has carried you through every moment before this one, faithful and steady, even when everything else felt uncertain. Your breath has been your companion through the darkest nights. Your heart has been beating steadily, even when your spirit felt like it was drowning. Your body has been holding you, even when your mind could not understand why. You are more resilient than you know, more loved than you feel, more necessary than you believe, more ready than you think for the lightness that is coming, not as escape from your humanity, but as the full embracing of it, the complete acceptance of both your shadows and your light, your questions and your knowing, your weariness and your wonder. You have survived every difficult day so far, every moment when you thought you couldn't take another step, every night when sleep felt impossible, and every morning when rising felt like the most heroic act imaginable. You have proven to yourself again and again that you are capable of more than you know, that you contain multitudes of strength you have never had to access until now. The night that has felt so long is beginning to soften at its edges, not because the darkness is ending, but because you are learning to be at peace with the rhythm of light and shadow that moves through all things, the eternal dance between rest and activity, between silence and song, between the inhale of gathering and the exhale of release. You are learning that dawn does not come to rescue you from the night, but to show you that you survived the night, that you made it through another cycle of death and rebirth, another opportunity to discover what remains when everything else falls away. And in surviving, you discovered something about yourself that you could not have learned any other way, something about your own unshakable essence that no amount of external pressure can diminish. Your heaviness was never meant to be permanent, dear soul. It was meant to be educational, a masterclass in the art of transformation, a deep teaching about the nature of impermanence and the reliability of change, about the way that all things move in cycles and nothing remains static for long. And now, having received its teaching, having learned what you came here to learn about your own depths and your own capacity to hold space for the difficult emotions without being destroyed by them, you can begin to release what it came to give you, not
by pushing it away or denying its reality, not by pretending it never happened or minimizing its impact, but by saying thank you with the same reverence you might offer to a teacher who changed your life forever. Thank you for showing me my depth, for revealing layers of myself I never knew existed, for proving that I am capable of surviving things I thought would destroy me. Thank you for revealing my strength, not the brittle strength that comes from avoiding difficulty, but the flexible strength that comes from learning to bend without breaking, to feel without drowning, to care without losing myself in the process. Thank you for preparing me for the lightness that is coming, for creating space within me for joy, by clearing out the accumulated grief I had been carrying without knowing it, for teaching me the difference between heaviness that serves and heaviness that stagnates, between productive struggle and unnecessary suffering. Thank you for being the cocoon that allowed me to grow wings, for providing the exact conditions necessary for my metamorphosis, for holding me in darkness just long enough for me to remember that I am made of light, that I came from light, that I will return to light, and that even in the deepest darkness, that light continues to burn within me like an eternal flame that nothing can extinguish. Thank you for teaching me that transformation is not comfortable, that growth requires a willingness to let go of who we have been in order to become who we are meant to be, that the caterpillar must completely surrender its identity before it can discover what it means to fly. The weight begins to shift now, not disappearing entirely, but changing its nature from burden to ballast, from obstacle to anchor, from something that drags you down to something that grounds you in your own knowing, your own truth, your own unshakable sense of who you are beneath all the stories you have told yourself about your limitations and your failures. You feel your feet upon the earth and remember that you belong here, that you have a right to take up space, to breathe deeply, to feel everything that moves through you without judgment or resistance, to be exactly who you are in this moment without apology or explanation. And in that remembering, in that return to your own essential nature, you begin to understand what the mystic meant when he spoke of the soul's need to descend before it can ascend, to know its depths before it can claim its heights, to learn the language of darkness before it can fully appreciate the vocabulary of light. You have been in the underworld of your own psyche, mapping territories that can only be explored by those brave enough to venture beneath the surface of things, to question everything they thought they knew about themselves and their place in this mysterious dance we call existence. But the journey down was never meant to be permanent. It was preparation for the journey up, for the return to the world with medicine in your hands, with stories that can heal others who are walking the path you have walked, with a quality of presence that can only be developed through intimate familiarity with your own shadows and your own light, your own capacity for both despair and hope, your own ability to hold paradox without needing to resolve it into something simpler or more comfortable. You are ready now, beloved one, ready in a way you have never been ready before, ready not because you have solved all your problems or answered all your questions or healed all your wounds, but because you have learned to be present with uncertainty, to find stability in the midst of change, to locate your center, even when everything around you seems to be spinning out of control. You have developed what the mystics call the unshakable witness, the part of you that can observe the storms of emotion and thought without being swept away by them, that can hold space for the full spectrum of human experience without losing its footing. The dawn waits for no one, but welcomes all who rise. If this spoke to your spirit, write in the comments, "I am awakening now,"